afternoon and welcome. We're really excited today for today's conversation with Victor Methos and Dean Darby Dickerson about Victor's prize-winning book, The Hallows. My name is Elizabeth Kronk Warner. My pronouns are she and hers. And if you've attended one of our events before, you know that I like to start with recognition of the land that at least I'm sitting on today, which is traditionally Indigenous land. It's particularly appropriate today because today is Indigenous Peoples Day. It's also the 137th anniversary of the signing of the Goshute Treaty, when this territory was marked as one of the outer boundaries of the Goshute tribe. So it seems particularly appropriate that we should acknowledge the tribal land that at least the University of Utah College of Law is sitting on. So with that acknowledgement, I want to briefly introduce our speakers and then tell you a little bit about our format. So first we have with us Victor Methos. Victor immigrated to the United States from Kabul, Afghanistan at the age of 9 and wrote his first story in English at the age of 10. He attended law school at the University of Utah and has been both a prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, having conducted more than 100 trials ranging from death penalty cases to defending the rights of Native American tribes to practice their religion freely, to suing police departments for civil rights violations. One particular case stuck with him, and it eventually became the basis for his first major bestseller, The Neon Lawyer. Since that time, Victor has focused his work on legal thrillers and mysteries, earning the 2020 Harper Lee Prize for The Hallows, which we're here to talk about today, and the Edgar nomination for Best Novel for his title, A Gambler's Jury. He has written over 50 novels, with many being #1 best-selling hits in the United States, United Kingdom, India, Australia, and throughout the world. He currently lives in Southern Utah. We are also joined today by Dean Darby Dickerson, who is Dean at the University of Illinois, Chicago, John Marshall School of Law. She is a tremendous leader in the field of legal education, currently serving as president of the American Association of Law Schools. And she has previously held deanships at both Texas Tech University and Stetson University. I had the pleasure of working with her when we were both at Texas Tech, and I can attest that she is an amazing person, and I'm really excited that we have her joining us today. So we're going to start off by having Victor talk for about 10 to 15 minutes about his book, and then Dean Dickerson will give her thoughts on the book, and then she and I will ask questions until roughly about 12:40, when we will turn it over to you to ask your questions, and I will go ahead and moderate those questions. So as we're talking, if you think of something that you would like to ask, feel free to put it in the Q&A function. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a button that says Q&A. Just go ahead and type your question in there, and we will get to it when time allows. All right, thank you so much. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce the 2020 Harper Lee Prize winner, Victor Methos. Victor.
Great, thank you so much. You make me sound so much more impressive than I am. I was like, that guy sounds kind of cool. So I started writing really young. We immigrated to this country when I was, I was under 10. And so we came here with nothing. My father had $20. And I tell this story often, but we landed at the airport and we met my uncle, and we're driving through Manhattan. And I look over and there's a gentleman urinating on the sidewalk in Manhattan. And I remember I leaned over to my mom and said, "Mom, Americans are so free. They can pee wherever they want to." Right? We had this just like amazing. America just knocked us out, just coming from a refugee camp where I live. We were living on one yogurt a day to coming here. And then my uncle took us to Benihana's as our first dinner. And so, there's meat cleavers being juggled and fish are catching on fire and the chefs are yelling. And so I thought this is the most amazing place I've ever been. And that really never left me, that sense of amazement of living in this country. I still wake up every morning and just say, thank you for letting me live here. So it made me, when I learned about the legal system, I was really impressed with how that coincided with my views of America as this land of opportunity and freedom. When I was 13 years old, my best friend at the time, he's actually still my best friend. We've been friends now almost 35 years. My best friend at the time was falsely arrested for a crime he didn't commit. Some football players, nothing against football players, I'm sure they're all very fine people. But these football players robbed a video game store, and the detectives, I thought pretty cleverly, brought our junior high school yearbook to the cashiers and said, choose the kids that you saw. Well, my friend looked like one of the football players, and so they chose him. So the police went and arrested him. And at this time, you had to be 14 or older to not be interrogated by police without a parent present. He was only 13, but the police still took him. So they put him in a room, they interrogated him. Two male grown detectives interrogated a 13-year-old boy for 8.5 hours. And at the very end, and credit to him, he withstood it and kept saying, I didn't do it. And then at the end of 8.5 hours, one of the detectives said, look, just tell us you didn't and we'll let you go. And so my friend, his name is, we'll call him Andy because that's his real name. But Andy said, okay, fine, I did it. And immediately he was arrested. And so I saw him start going through the justice system, and it really started psychologically damaging him. I mean, nobody believed him because there's a confession. His own mother thought he was a liar. So people at church started treating him different, people at school, because he was charged with a serious felony. I mean, they took a lot of stuff. And so, he became suicidal. And the only person he could talk to was me, because I knew the boys who did it. I know he was innocent. So I was just filled with all this anger that the government could treat someone like this who didn't commit this crime. And then finally, one of the boys, as they were going through the criminal system, one of them came forward and said, yeah, Andy's not part of this. It's this other kid. And so they dropped the charges against him. But by then the damage had been done. He still brings it up sometimes when we talk about it, about how terrifying and isolating that was. So a couple months after that whole incident happened, I was just browsing books at the library and I came across To Kill a Mockingbird, and I read it. And I really was not the same person after I read that book. I didn't know what a criminal defense lawyer was until I read about Atticus Finch. And I didn't know you could have somebody to fight. Andy went through this thing with just a court-appointed attorney who didn't really seem to fight for him. So I thought that was just how the system was. But once I read To Kill a Mockingbird, I was impassioned by the law. I wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer. My fate was sealed. And so I did become a criminal defense lawyer. And at this time, I was writing everything I could. I was writing short stories. I racked up, in college, because everybody's so broke. This is actually interesting. I almost rented Ted Bundy's apartment. He has an apartment right next to, because he went to the University of Utah Law School. So I was looking for apartments, and there was this one that was like half the price of all the other apartments. And I'm broke. I'm working full time and going to college. I thought it was my lucky day, right? Like $300 a month. Yes, I'll take it. And right before I was going to sign on, I decided to Google it, and I Googled it, and like he'd murdered like 3 people there. He kept, he kept things in the freezer, and the guy's just like, yeah, I don't have to disclose that. So I was very lucky that I didn't rent that apartment. But I was writing short stories at the time to try and make ends meet, and I was writing, easily 3 or 4 short stories a week and sending them to the various magazines back when magazines actually existed. And so I was writing novels as well, and just getting rejection after rejection. I would say I got probably 4,000 to 5,000 rejections from agents and publishers. And then I went to law school, and I did an internship at the prosecutor's office under Sim Gill, who's now the DA. And then I went out on my own with another prosecutor, and we opened a criminal defense firm. And hearing stories from my clients and going through that inspired me to start writing legal thrillers, because at the time I'd been writing mysteries and science fiction. But I saw that the law is so rich in conflict, which is really what all stories are, is conflict, that I started writing about those. And the case that the dean mentioned that kind of stuck with me was it was a father whose 15-year-old daughter was gang raped at a party. And the father went to the party, guns blazing, and he shot everybody pretty much, killed 2 of the boys. And then the father was put on trial, and they were seeking the death penalty against him. So that really fascinated me, because I was like, well, what would I do in that spot? What would anybody do if you were the father in that spot? So it was a really compassionate case for me. So I wrote a book about it called The Neon Lawyer, and it just kind of took off. I self-published it because I've been rejected by every publisher out there. And then in self-publishing, it just took off and became a bestseller. And so that's when my current publisher, Thomas & Mercer, who's owned by Amazon, reached out to me and said they wanted to recruit me. And so they signed me to a book deal in 2013. And I've been writing legal thrillers ever since. And so The Hollows really came about because a federal judge here in Utah named Judge Benson told me once that there's only 3 types of criminal lawyers. There's those that can only do prosecution, there's those that can only do criminal defense, and then there's those that can do both sides, right? So I'm one that can do both sides. But I wondered what would happen if someone who can only do criminal defense had to do prosecution? What would that do to them? What would that feel like? And so that's where Tatum Graham was born, and this book was born. It's somebody who cannot picture himself being a prosecutor, who becomes a prosecutor and uses the law to help redeem himself, which is something that was part of my journey as well. Is the law helped me to redeem myself. It helped me to reestablish a relationship with my father. It helped me to learn to be compassionate. I saw people that we would consider the dregs of society, the most horrible people that live here. And I learned about their histories and their families and their thoughts and their feeling. It really taught me that, there but for the grace of God go I. We're very fortunate to be in the positions we are, and not to be somewhere else that we really easily could have ended up with just one or two wrong choices. So that's how the book came about, and that's how I got here, and I'm speaking to you today.
Thanks, Victor. And thanks, Elizabeth, for inviting me. It's an honor for me to be with you guys today. Every year when the University of Alabama announces the Harper Lee Prize, I run to read it if I haven't had time to read the finalists. And this year I saw that Victor had won, and I rushed and got the Kindle version, and it was a Saturday. And I sat there and read the book all the way through. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, I recommend it. It's a quick read. And I love reading legal thrillers, especially those written by lawyers, because they really know their stuff. And Victor I can tell you is a really good trial lawyer, because what he has in the book is incredibly accurate. And I just want to congratulate you, Victor, because I think you've written a great book with the Hollows. And I love what you said earlier about conflict, that that's the essence of what a writer does. And there's a lot of points of tension in that I think you captured so well. Law versus justice, and I'll come back to that point. How money or not having money can really impact outcomes. And when I think we all hope that wouldn't be the case, but I think that really came through in more than one point in the book. The past versus the present, you have father versus son, you have prosecution versus defense. And I also really love how you captured not only accurately what goes on inside of a courtroom, but what goes on outside, lawyers working together. I love that you had some junior attorneys who the main character was mentoring along the way. I thought that was great to see. And also what's going on in Tatum's, your main character's personal life. I think you really captured it all. And it was just a wonderful read. And I went on and read the Gambler's Jury after that. And I've got some of your other books teed up. So thank you for doing what you do. And you're on mute.
I am on mute. Yeah. I just wanted to say thank you so much. That's too kind of you.
So my first question has to do with this tension between law and justice. I think most of us go to law school wanting to do something good and to help other people. And often, we leave law school in debt and we take a job that's going to pay off that debt. And at some point, we find ourselves practicing not for justice, but for something else. Often, I know I went into big law and I loved doing what I was doing, but at some point I was like, wait a minute, I spend my days helping people try to get money from other people who then go bankrupt, so they don't have money. My client doesn't give money, and then they don't want to pay me. Why am I participating? Why am I participating in this? And we sort of lose sight for some period of time about why we went to law school, and that it's not about winning or getting money. It really is about justice. So you told a couple of stories about your past, but I wonder if you have any other thoughts about how we as lawyers or lawyers to be can keep our eye on that connection between law and justice.
Yeah. That's a tough one for me. Criminal defense law is really not like the other legal professions because we have such a strong duty to our client. There was a case I think it was out of the Ninth Circuit where a person had kidnapped a young woman and told his lawyer where she was. And the prosecution came to the attorney and said, you need to reveal where the victim is. She doesn't have any food, she doesn't have any water, she's going to die. And the lawyer refused, saying it would betray attorney-client privilege. So they did an emergency appeal, and the appellate court actually found it would be sanctionable for that lawyer to tell the prosecution where the victim is. I mean, that's how sacred attorney-client privilege is in our system. So the defense lawyer has this duty I mean, I want to fight for justice. I certainly do, but my client has to come first. So it's this weird conflict and tension I have to take on every single day. Whereas, I did a little bit of divorce, a little bit of contracts and things like that. There wasn't anything like that there. I could clearly see what the right and just answer was. So criminal law is not like that. For anybody that's interested in that, living in the gray area, I would highly recommend becoming a prosecutor or criminal defense lawyer. It's a lot of fun and it keeps you on your toes. But yeah, it's something I struggle with every single day. And I think every lawyer struggles with this, right? Do I do good or do I make good money? Because usually it's one or the other. It's very hard to do both. I worked for a corporate firm and I quit after like just a few days. I worked at a divorce firm and I remember one of the clients saying, I don't care about the money. I just want you to hurt her. Just what she cares about is the cat and the Xbox. Just take that. I don't care how much it costs. And I'm like, I quit. I'm out of here. I didn't get into this to hurt people on purpose. So for anybody thinking out there that, hey, I gotta take a job to get money and then do that, don't. Your life is very short. You don't have that long. And to be perfectly honest with you, if you do what you love, money always seems to follow. Everybody I know that does what they love, they never have to worry about money. It's only the people that are chasing money that I see that are struggling financially. So just do what you love and pursue justice. Don't worry about the other part.
I love that idea of pursuing justice and doing what you love. And I think that fits nicely with my first question, which is the American Bar Association designated this past Saturday, October 10th, as Law Student Wellness Day. And Tatum was as successful in his career, but I'm not sure anybody would necessarily say that he was well when he left Miami. Can you talk to us about the importance of wellness in the practice of law? And as a related question, can you tell us about your Sunday evening test?
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. You read my blog, huh? Yeah. So wellness, I mean, all you have is your health, ultimately. Anybody that's been sick can tell you there is nothing else. That's really all there is. And you can't be at your best when you feel bad. You just can't. But sometimes we have to. I'll have a trial. I can't call in sick. So there was a saying by someone on the Raiders from a long time ago that I think of whenever I'm in that position. He just said, if you're tired, do it tired. If you're sick, do it sick. So, I just get up and I get through it and do it. But outside of that, I devote as much time as I can to meditation, to reading, to exercise. Your mind can't be sharp with your body, being decrepit. So I think every good lawyer, especially the trial lawyers, need to stay fit. And you kind of have to be a Renaissance man or woman. You have to be out there learning everything. I watch every type of movie, every type of documentary, read every type of book, listen to every type of music, because you never know what's going to be helpful in a trial and what's not. And so I would say learn everything you possibly can and stay in good health if you want to be tip top in court, because there's nothing like court that keeps you on your toes. You never know what's going to happen next. As far as the Sunday test, that's something I kind of made up. But basically, I've worked 100 jobs in my life. I hated working for other people. So I just bounce around and I hated it. I'd get fired sometimes I'd quit. So finally I developed this test that on Sunday night, like 7 p.m., everybody's, kind of quieted down. How do I feel? Do I feel unhappy? Do I feel miserable that tomorrow's Monday? Am I not looking forward to it? If I am, I'm not doing what I should be doing. So I use that as a test for every job I had. And it wasn't until I opened my own firm and started writing that I realized, okay, these are the two things that make me happy. And so those are the two things I did. I cut everything else out. I think that's a great litmus test for anybody to use. How do you feel Sunday night about tomorrow being Monday? And if you're honest with yourself, I think most people would say, oh, I'm miserable. And so they're not doing what they love. And so it's really important to follow your passion.
Victor, I am a legal writing professor, so I'm really interested in your process of writing. Do you start with an outline or a storyboard? Do you plan everything out, or do you let the characters develop? The questions of when and where you write, who you allow to read your drafts, all of that type of stuff. Yeah. So you give us some insight on your process, it'd be great.
Sure. No, I usually just picture one scene and that becomes my basis of the book. And then I write what came before and what came after. And then I've done this long enough. I've been writing now 33 years. I've done it long enough where I can feel like I just sit in a room and I'm writing down what the characters say, which my wife always thinks I'm insane. I'm like, I had no idea he was going to say that. She's like, what are you talking about? That's you. But it really, like, writers that have done this a long time will tell you the characters take on a life of their own. Thomas Harris, actually, who wrote Silence of the Lambs, he said there was a point where he was writing and he got legitimately scared because he thought Hannibal Lecter was going to say something about him, was going to cut through and say something injurious about him. And he was like, I was a little nervous. And so that's where really the characters take on a life of their own. It's, Norman Mailer called this the spooky art, because it's spooky how much stuff comes out that doesn't feel like it's part of you. And so I try to just let my unconscious take over. I just write that very first scene, and then I just go through and write what came before and what came after. I don't let anybody read my drafts. That's kind of just for me at first, because writing is so personal. The first drafts have stuff in there that I honestly don't want to tell anybody about. Even in The Hollows, he has this really strained relationship with his father. And I did with my father, because he left us when I was really young. Some of those conversations are verbatim conversations that I had with my dad. And so it's really painful for me to go through that book and read that book, because it brings all that stuff up. And then the first draft had even more stuff in there. So I don't let anybody read my drafts. I try to go through it a few times first. I'm not a big outliner. It feels like an essay to me. Once it goes from I want to I have to, it's no longer fun, and it'll lose that spark. So I never want it to go to I have to. And that, with outlining, that seems to do that to me. So I'd much rather just have characters pictured in my head and then just listen to what they do and what they say. It's a lot funner. You have to keep it fun. If it's not fun, then you might as well go do something else.
Do you write every day at a certain time period?
Yeah, I wake up at 5 and I typically write from 5 to 7. And then in the afternoons, I'll do edits. I'll do rewrites and edits for a couple hours. Yeah. But I always try to leave some in the tank. I never write to exhaustion where I'm out. I always try to have a little bit left after I'm done writing so that I can pick up where I left off tomorrow.
That's fascinating. So related to your writing, how do you think that writing fiction has improved your legal writing and vice versa?
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting question. I've never actually thought about that. It's pretty clear how the law influenced my writing. You couldn't write The Hollows if you weren't a lawyer. There's just too much little teeny idiosyncrasies that only trial lawyers can know about. As far as my writing influenced my lawyering, I've never actually thought of that. That's interesting. I guess it's made me kind of more cognizant of people's motivations and where they're coming from. Because I have a lot of clients I defend just come from these horrific, tragic backgrounds. And I used to never really pay attention to that. And I've noticed that in later years, I really started kind of delving into why they did what they did. And it's helped me connect with them more and help me come up with a better resolution. I think that probably came from my writing, is learning about their backgrounds in more detail, which I didn't do when I first got out of law school.
So is there any chance we're going to see The Hollows on the big or the small screen?
There was somebody, a showrunner from Doctor Who was interested in it for AMC. I don't know what's going to come of that. That was like 3 or 4 months ago. You'll find, if anybody out there is becoming a writer, you'll find movie people will call you up and tell you you're the greatest person in the world and you've written a masterpiece, and then you won't hear from them again for 8 months. So I actually have a friend who's a writer. His book got sold 16 years ago. It's been in development now for 16 years. So I don't really think about the movie side of stuff, but yeah, I have several books that are in the realm of somebody over there. So hopefully we will, but I don't know. Legal thrillers are great because they're so cheap to make. You really need a courtroom, a couple of houses, and just some actors that are decent, and you can make a really good legal thriller. So I would think studios would be jumping all over that. And they're desperate for content right now because everybody's at home watching TV, the streaming services. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we get that next year.
So can you give us a little insight on whether you're working on anything now?
Yeah, I just finished a book about a real case. A lot of my books are cases that I've read about. I go through, maybe some other lawyers do this too, but I look for abnormal cases and then read the trial transcripts. You learn a ton. There's so much to learn from trial transcripts. If I want to know something, if I have a DNA issue, I go find a bunch of cases that dealt with DNA and I read the trial transcripts. It's a great way to learn. So I found a case from the 80s in California where somebody broke into a cabin and murdered an entire family. And then he manipulated the police to the point that they released him, and he left to Oregon. He died an old man. He 100% got away with murdering a family. So my book is loosely based on that. It's this genius who comes in, manipulates the police, manipulates the system, and we try to find out whether he's able to pull it off or not. In the real world, he did. He got away with it. But in my book, it's unclear so far.
I find that a lot of lawyers are also wannabe fiction authors.
Mhm.
What are some advice that you have for people who want to be fiction writers, both in terms of getting it done
Mhm.
and also in terms of getting it published? Because you talked about the rejections and then going the self-publishing route to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is there's no such thing as I don't have any time. What you're really saying when you say I don't have any time to write is this isn't a high enough priority for me to make time for it. So first of all, you got to make it a priority so you can actually do it every day. And then the second thing is if you love it, you're not going to stop. I wrote for free for 20 years. I didn't make, I made 25 bucks here, 10 bucks here on short stories, but I basically did it for free for 2 decades. If you have that kind of love and passion for it, you're going to be successful, because it didn't matter how many rejections I got. And I got some nasty rejections. Oh my gosh. Some of the editors were just having a bad day or something, and they decided to take it out on me. So I never let it affect me. I knew I was going to be successful, so I just kept writing, and I never let the rejections affect me. But I've known several writers who've gotten 3, 4, 5 bad rejections, and they've given up, and they're like, well, I'm clearly not good. And so you can't feel that way. You have to just keep writing. Ultimately, it's not your decision whether you're good or not. Your job is to write it and put it out there, and then the people will decide what they think about it. So I just never think about what people will think about it. I write it, and if it's enjoyable for me and something I would read, then I know I've succeeded. I have no idea whether it's going to be successful or not. And if you look at the publishing industry, they can never predict what's going to be a bestseller. They're terrible at predicting what's going to be a bestseller. Nobody knows. So I never worry about that kind of stuff. I just write what I would read.
As a follow-up, I can't remember if you had formal training in writing. And for people who don't, do you suggest that they go, get a degree or take classes, or just get it down on paper as best they can?
No, I had no training in writing. No, it wouldn't be fun for me to do that. And because I played guitar, and I actually learned that from guitar, I took one guitar lesson and I hated it. And I was like, I don't want to do this. So I would just go home and I would listen to my favorite bands and try to pick up guitar. And I picked it up on my own. And it was just such a fun journey of discovery that, I did that until I was like 14 or 15. And I realized I wanted to do that with my writing. I wanted it to be a journey to discover things. I didn't want someone to tell me how to write. Besides, no one can tell you how to write. Nobody can express to you. Writing is so unique. It comes from so deep in your unconscious. Nobody can tell you what to do. They can tell you where to put an apostrophe or where to put a comma. But even like if you look at Cormac McCarthy, who wrote the brilliant No Country for Old Men, he doesn't use any punctuation, right? So even that doesn't matter. No, I would say go on a journey and use it to discover yourself and discover who you are. It's much funner that way.
Wonderful. Well, I have to ask, as Dean of Utah Law School, do you have any favorite memories from your time at the University of Utah School of Law?
Yeah. Graduating, does that count? No. Yeah, of course. There was some amazing stuff that happened to me. I forget his name, but the professor of property, he was like 90 years old, and he was a former boxer in like the 40s. I don't remember his name. He taught me some great lessons from boxing in the 40s, because I used to box as well. And he's like, number one, and this is great for trial law. Number one, when you're in negotiation or in a fight, never threaten. Because when you threaten, you tip your hand. And he said, number two, always be nice. Because when you're nice, it throws them off. They don't know what to make of you. I've kept those lessons for my entire life. I've used those 2 lessons I learned in first year property. So that's a great memory. My third year, we got to do internships outside of the law school. And I actually did my first jury trial as a third-year law student at the prosecutor's office, which was incredible. How many law students get to do that? So that is like my favorite program I've ever done. Everybody that goes to the U, I tell them, make sure to take advantage of that. Get out there and do some trials in your third year. There's nothing like it. It was terrifying, but it was so much fun and such a great learning experience.
Well, wonderful. I agree. I always encourage students to go out and get some real world experiences, and I'm sure Dean Dickerson does too. So I want to go ahead and turn to our audience's questions. So we have a question from Lori Nelson. Lori says, we just did a webinar on eyewitness testimony and the inherent weaknesses in eyewitness testimony. Have you found that to be true in your career, and does that play a part in your books?
Yeah, eyewitness testimony is absolutely horrible. I mean, it's so weird when you see it for the first time, when you see 6 people see an event and all 6 of them have a different interpretation. And really what it is that we see the world, it's almost like the Matrix, right? There's this great book called The Body of the Mind. And what it says is that we're basically living in a matrix made up of our unconscious. The unconscious is the bulk of who we are. It's why we do the things we do, but we don't even see it. We don't even know it. And so it's created this perception of the world around us that is totally different from the next person. And so when a witness sees an event, they're witnessing it through their experiences, through their thought processes, through their through their memories of what a person like that is like and whatnot. And so it completely changes the dynamic. For example, I'll give you an example, inherent bias. So I know some police officers that I would consider some of the best men in the world, very moral men. They love everybody. They treat everybody equally. They don't see themselves as racist. And yet they'll pull over African-American drivers at 4 times the rate that they do white drivers. And when I bring it up to them, they're like, no, that's not happening. But then when you look at the actual numbers, they're like, wow, I had no idea. And so it's just built into them. That's how they see the world. And a witness is the same way. When they see a Black person do a crime compared to a white person in the same scenario, they're going to have a different impression of that based on their inherent biases. So eyewitness testimony is a horrific way. And I am so, so grateful. We have DNA evidence now. I mean, I don't even know what they did before DNA evidence. That must have been a disaster.
So Kevin Carrillo wanted to know about To Kill a Mockingbird. Specifically, you mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird was a major influence on your decision to become a lawyer. Do you have any other examples of books or movies that have influenced your career?
Yeah, honestly, the first movie I ever saw, I didn't even speak English at the time, was Jaws. And I don't think anything's ever influenced me quite as much. I joke with people that all my books are really just Jaws. They're just Jaws in a courtroom. So yeah, my first movie was Jaws, then Conan the Barbarian, and then Raiders of the Lost Ark. So those movies hold a special place in my heart still. As far as legal movies, I really like The Civil Action with John Travolta, which is based on a real case. I actually heard about that from Jency Anderson in law school. My first year of law school, she was my legal writing professor. She made it required reading. And I read it, and then I went and checked out the movie. It's a brilliant movie. It's fantastic, based on a real incident in Boston. So yeah, I would recommend anybody read that book.
Yes, when I used to teach civil procedure, I would have students read that book because it does a really nice job of kind of walking through the various steps in a civil action.
Right.
Robbie
It's so heartbreaking too, because it involves children, and when you see that in the real world, it's awful.
Yes, exactly. Robbie Richter was wondering, do you know if any of your books have helped out on a case?
Helped out on a case? I don't know. No, I'll get sometimes detectives or prosecutors or people emailing me, telling me how much they enjoy it, but I don't know if it's ever helped on a case. I know there's a couple law schools that have it required reading, like the Hollows required reading and some places like that, because I reveal some trial tricks. And so that maybe that, but no, I haven't heard anything directly about it helping on a case. I did get the cutest email I've ever gotten was from an 86-year-old man who had done 2 years of law school and dropped out. And he said, I just finished The Leon Lawyer. It inspired me, and I've re-enrolled to finish my 3rd year of law school. I thought, oh, that made my year. That was the coolest email I've ever gotten.
That's great. Is he the 87-year-old man that I just saw a story on who's trying to take the bar exam?
Oh, really? I haven't seen that.
Yeah, there was a national story about a 87-year-old gentleman. I see Dean Dickerson nodding her head, who is trying to pass the bar exam.
That's great. Good for him.
Yeah, Victor, you talked about doing research into trial transcripts. It also seems like a lot of what you write about, or at least in the Hollows, had some autobiographical ties, write what you know. But if you're veering off a little bit on something you don't know, how much research do you do, and how do you go about that?
It depends. I don't like a ton of research. I think it ruins the book. I won't say a name, but there was a very, very big time author that released a book a few months ago. And they had done, I want to say 2 years of research into the various aspects. And the book came off as 75% research, because you have a tendency to just dump all the information in. It's got like 1.5 or 2 stars on Amazon now. And this is a huge author. And I've always felt that way. I've always felt I don't like the research. It's about the story. there's really only one story we tell ourselves, and it's the same story that Neanderthal and Homo erectus told themselves around the fire. There's something innate in fiction that we need that teaches us how to live and how to find happiness in life. And that's what I care about in my fiction. I don't really care about whether I get the caliber of a gun right or not, which actually I recommend you do, because you will never get a deluge of emails more than if you get anything wrong about a gun. Like, so I had one gun that didn't have a safety, and I mentioned it had a safety. I swear I got 1,000 emails from gun people. So my publisher actually, I had to go in and change it because it was just too many emails. But I don't like doing a ton of research unless it's research I enjoy. Like, I like reading trial transcripts. It's fun. So I'll do that a lot, but I don't like doing a ton of research. If I don't know something, I'll ask an expert, or I'll skip over it, or I'll just make it up if I have to.
I can certainly relate to that point on guns. My husband is a gun aficionado, and we'll be watching a movie, and if the gun makes the wrong noise, or if somebody cocks it and it can't be cocked, he will quickly pounce on that. So yeah. I have no doubt that you received lots of feedback on the guns. So I'll just remind the audience, if you have any other questions, feel free to put it in the question and answer box. But I have another question as well. Given Tatum's relationship with younger characters in the Hallows, it seems like mentorship is important to you. Is that a correct interpretation of the book? And if yes, maybe you can speak to your experiences with mentorship.
Oh, sure. We went out. I mean, me and the other prosecutor that started our law firm, we just jumped ship and went out on our own. We didn't know anything. I mean, I'd only been there like 10 months and he'd been there like a year. So we really didn't know anything. So we relied, at first, it was the defense. You'll find that the criminal community, prosecutors and defense attorneys, are really a close-knit group. I'm always surprised when civil attorneys tell me how much animosity there is in their practice, because criminal, like, we go hang out, me and the prosecutors go hang out afterwards, even the judges. And so it's a real close community. I would even have prosecutors give me suggestions like, hey, you may not want to do that. This is kind of how it works. And then there were attorneys that would send us business when we started out. They'd send us cases that they didn't have time for, just to make sure that we could keep the lights on. So it was I was really grateful for how tight knit the criminal defense community is. It's my favorite field of law for that reason. We broke off and did some, we did some personal injury for a while because I knew how to do it and we thought it would be easy. And I stopped doing it very quickly. I remember I picked up the phone once and there was yelling on the other end before it got to my ear. And so I was like, all right, I'm done with civil law. I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah. So one of our first cases, actually, we sent interrogatories out, right? And so the guy took his middle finger, put it on the interrogatories, traced it, and then sent it back to me. So I was like, man, these civil lawyers do not mess around. They do not want to be friends. So it's just not worth the stress to me. Criminal law is just so much funner and so much easier. And I have so many great friends. Even the police officers and I are friends. So we feel like we're workers in the same factory. And so I got mentored by everybody. I got everybody there helped me out when I first started.
This wasn't going to be my next question, but what you said triggered it. Do you think that's because of the smaller community you're in, and that if you were in a larger community, there would be more animosity between the prosecution and defense?
Maybe. I've always kind of thought it's because we see humanity as it really is, rather than like we think it is. And so it changes our view of how we view people. And I've noticed, prosecutors will come in, these new prosecutors, and they'll be really hard line the first year, no deals, yada, yada. And then you see them 5 years later and they're little pussycats, just like, yeah, whatever, I feel bad for them. And I think it teaches you over time that humans are ultimately the same. We just make either good decisions or bad decisions. And so I think it's a tight-knit community because we're all kind of more in touch with that.
And the question I was going to ask is, in the Hallows, Tatum is writing a book called The Art of War. And I'm wondering if that's, something that you're actually working on separately, or if that comes from your own trial experiences.
No, all those lessons are stuff I use every day. It's funny, the award committee for the Harper Lee Prize, one of the deans there said, and Tatum's so manipulative because, like he did that magic trick in front of the jury. I was thinking like, oh, I actually did that magic trick in front of a jury. Like you do what you have to do. So all those lessons are stuff I really use. Like when I ask a question that I want a yes to, I'll nod. I'll say, correct, right? You did that. I'm shocked how many times people that should say no be like, well, I'm not sure, or even just outright yes. Once you get a witness in this rhythm where they know they're done for, and you nod and or shake your head, and you can just like really like kind of lead them along. So those lessons like that I teach in the book are stuff that I've just learned over a decade of trial law. So yeah, no, it's all real. You can go out and use all of it tomorrow.
Great, good to know. We get a good book and some lessons on how to conduct an excellent trial. So wonderful.
Yeah,
2 for 1.
Right. Yeah. And I think, I don't remember if I mentioned this in the Hollers Night about who's the best trial lawyers, but when people ask me what prosecutor are you most scared of, it's not, it's not the guy that comes in with like the Gucci suit and the Harvard law degree. I can smash that guy. He doesn't know anything. The girl who comes in like stumbling and she's stuttering and it's her first year out of law school and she's spilling coffee because her hands are shaking, I'm terrified of that prosecutor, because that jury is going to throw their arms around her and protect her like nothing. So that is the type of prosecutor I'm scared of, someone who's honest and real with the jury. So as long as you have to be honest, they have like, it's really weird. Juries have like these authentic tentacles that can tell if you're being authentic or not. And so those authentic, new, young, scared prosecutors are really dangerous for our cases. So it's the experienced guys who come off as slick and use, $10,000 words. Those are the guys I don't worry about at all.
It's interesting. When I first came here as dean, one of our alumni told me a story of a high-profile case that was being litigated in Tooele, Utah. But Tooele, Utah is not spelled how it sounds.
Right.
You might call it Tool or something along those lines. And so the defense hired very high-profile New York law firm, and there was a lot of back and forth about kind of in conference with the judge about not making sure that the jury did not know that the, was outside, kind of like you're saying, big slick lawyers from New York. And eventually the judge ruled in favor of defense counsel that didn't have to come out. And then of course, the first day in trial, they mispronounced Tooele. And so everybody knew that they were not local.
That's great. Did they lose?
So I thought that was a good example of what you were just chatting about.
Did they lose? Did the prosecution get a conviction?
I didn't get that part of the story. I should ask a follow-up.
Yeah.
So Robbie Richter had a second question. Of all the books you've written, do you have a favorite? Or perhaps do you have one that means the most to you?
Let's see. Yeah. There's a book I wrote called Blood Dahlia. It's just self-published. It's basically Jaws with a serial killer. I can be honest about it. But I consulted with a psychic, with a quote unquote real psychic. I've always been fascinated by the supernatural, like Bigfoot and the paranormal and UFOs and stuff. So I consulted with her about it, about how she actually works. And I don't know if she convinced me, but there was some creepy stuff that she told me that there's no way she could have known. And she's actually worked with law enforcement across the country. And this is verified. This is something I looked up. There's been detectives everywhere from New York to Los Angeles that have called her up and said, we'll pay for you to come out here. We got this case and we're about to put it in the open unsolved files. And so she flies out and helps them out. And she's solved some cases. She's helped them, lead them to some evidence that has led to suspects. So that's been the most fascinating for me, because I'm naturally a skeptic, but she almost had me convinced. I mean, there was stuff in there that I still can't explain how she figured out.
So you have an audience of law students. So I just want to ask you, what's either your best piece of advice for law students or the most important lesson you learned from law school?
Oh, okay. It feels like it feels like it's the whole world. It is a small sliver of your life. Law school is a small sliver of your life. I know it feels like the world ending if you get a bad grade or finals are coming up. You're going to look back on it and laugh. So just have fun and just realize it's just a teeny part of your journey. And ultimately, really what you want is to spend time with the professors that can teach you about the real world. And so just focus on that. Take the courses that you're going to need when you get out. People usually take like the easiest courses and stuff like that. I wouldn't do that. Whatever you're going to specialize in, take those courses or whatever you find interesting. And just remember, just keep in mind, it will be over and you're not going to fail. You're going to do fine.
Well, wonderful. Victor, thank you so much. That was fantastic advice and some great advice to end on for our law students in the audience who are thinking through and kind of in the throes of law school right now. So we really appreciate that. And we really appreciate your insight into your writing process and telling us more about your books. I'm sure everyone agrees that this was just a fantastic panel discussion, and we really appreciate your time. And again, congratulations on the Harper Lee Prize. It's very exciting, and we're all incredibly proud of you. And I also want to, again, thank Dean Dickerson for taking time out of her busy day. It is always a privilege and honor to have her participate in anything. And so I'm glad that she was able to find time for us. I found her questions very insightful and interesting. So a big thank you to our two panelists today, and a big thank you to everyone who was able to join us. And we hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day and a great week. Thank you so much.